Iowa.
Yeah, and so because you're here online, we're so glad that you made it here. We built this specifically for you to engage with other people and to be a little bit more interactive than just watching a video of a sermon. So hop in that chat, say where you're from, and maybe what it's like in terms of weather, and your name if you want to share that. And then as we go along, you can jump in over to infuse.church/connect if you're interested in learning about some more opportunities, and just be as present as you possibly can here for the next hour or so, just so you can get the most out of it. But yeah, we're so glad that you're here.
Yeah.
We have a question.
We do, to try to make engaging a little easier for you. You mentioned the weather where you're watching from. Right now in Iowa, it has been a beautifully snowy morning.
It has, yes.
Beautiful snow. However, along with that brings moving your snow. So we're curious of how the weather is where you're at, and if you had to move some snow this morning.
And if you didn't, I don't know if we want to hear about it.
Maybe don't comment. I'm just kidding.
No. Tell us how glorious it
Yes.
is. Give us a vision of what it will be like here in Iowa in the summer. We need that hope.
Yes, yeah, and how do you move your snow, right? I know some of our neighbors have the nice snow plow. Are they called snow plows? Or
Snow blower.
Snow blowers.
If I had a snow plow, that'd be a different
that too.
next level right there.
We're just out there scooping. So share your snow moving experiences in the chat below.
There you go. And Heather Cutchcroft is your guide today. She's the chat host, so she's going to be there saying some things and welcoming everybody here. We are in a message series called Ready or Not, talking about change and how we respond to change and all of the things that are coming for us in the new year, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
What's Pastor Taylor going to be talking about today?
Yep, this morning Pastor Taylor is back to share with us a story from King David, actually, about a time that he was under pressure. And it's going to teach us, hopefully, how to make more wise decisions and not cut corners.
Yes.
When we're under pressure, which can be really easy to do. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say.
Yeah. And you are a resident expert on small groups as well. You're going to say more about small groups, but specifically for the online folks.
Yes, so online viewers, if you are interested in an online-only group, if that works for you because of your location, your situation, or just because it makes life easier, whatever that looks like for you, we would love to get you connected in a group on a weekly basis. So outside of Sunday morning, being able to stay connected with those people you're chatting along with. So to do that, head to infuse.church/groups, and under Can't Find a Group, just fill out a card there with your information and then say online only group. And hopefully we can get you guys connected, whether that's a short-term or long-term group, and just help our online attenders feel connected as well.
Yeah. Well, we're really glad that you're here, like we said, and we will see you after the service to do a little debrief and say hi to some folks. Good to see you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Infuse. I'm David, this is Britt and Becky. If you would please stand and join us in singing. These
You make me new. You are making me new. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. You make me new. You are making me new. You make me new. You are making me new. If you'll bow your heads and pray with me. Lord, we just thank you that your hand is here to guide and protect us in the chaos of our lives and the chaos of the world that we live in, Lord. You make us new in the chaos that we bring to you, Lord. And we just thank you for having a hand in our lives, Lord. Sometimes it's hard to see that, but when we notice it, it's beautiful. And we just want to thank you for that, Lord. I pray this in your name. Amen. You may be seated.
Hello, welcome to Infuse Church. My name is Stephanie, and we're really glad you are here today. Infuse is a church for imperfect people to explore faith and find community. No matter where you've been, what you've done, or your experience with church in the past, we pray today will help you take a step forward in a new direction. If it's your first time today, we'd love to connect with you. If you're in person, say hello to our first-time guest host standing by the first-time banner in the hallway. Not only are they super friendly, but they have a free gift for you. How much better could it get? If you're joining us online for the first time, fill out our online connection card because we'd love to reach out and say hello to you too. If you've come prepared to give today, there are 3 ways to do that. 1, you can give in person at the table in the back of the gym. 2, online through our website or Infuse Church app. And 3, mail to the address on your screen. Thank you for your generosity. To stay up to date with what's happening at Infuse Church and discover ways to make Infuse your church home, subscribe to our amazing weekly email by going to the address on your screen. Follow us on social media, and most importantly, download the Infuse Church app. Thank you again for joining us.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Infuse Church. My name's Devin.
And I'm Caitlin, and we are so glad that you are joining us this morning, even with the beautiful snow outside. Some of us probably think maybe more beautiful than others, but
Right. Depends on if you had to move it or not.
Yep. And we are here to tell you the top 2 things that you need to know this morning. Our first one is that we are still talking about signing up for a short-term group. These just launched last week for sign up, so you haven't missed out yet. You can sign up 2 ways, either online at infuse.church/groups or with these nifty little cards that are located on all of your seats. You can fill it out with your information, what group you're interested in, and then place it in the bucket at the back of the gym.
You want to tell us a little bit about these groups? Have you been through any of these before?
I have, yeah. So I've been through Diving Deeper, which is just getting into the Bible, really. It goes through the book of John, but it really is so much more. For me personally, it was the first time I had ever read in its entirety a book of the Bible. So for me, that was a really big moment spiritually. Like, I learned a lot, and I learned about how to read my Bible and even like what it means historically. So it was a really good study. Made a difference.
Awesome.
Yep.
I've been through, I said this, you heard that, and if you're looking to understand a little bit more about your communication style, who you are as a person, maybe why some people respond to you better than others, this is a really good class for whatever relationships you have, work, home, the rest of life. It's good.
My husband and I still like refer to each other by our colors from this study, so it comes in handy. I don't know, for better or for worse there. But what else we got? Financial peace. I've done that one as well.
Okay.
About 4 years ago, but we still have our budget meetings in our household. If you guys have been through that program before, you'll know what I mean. But it's a lot of really good strategies to help us meet our financial goals, and I think it'll be really useful for you guys as well.
And then the last one, do you have, I think the title's changing on that one.
Ignore this, everyone. It is not Friendship for Teens. It is the Teen Small Group. Does that sound cooler? The cool Teen Small Group.
That's what we're going for.
Yeah, they laughed at me. I probably shouldn't have said that like that. But if you're a teen, this is a group for you. If you have teenagers in your household, talk to them about it. They're talking about it in their middle school ministry every week. So I just encourage you to get them signed up and connect with their peers.
And if it sucks, it's only 6 weeks long. Just remember that. No, it's gonna.
And it'll be better
be
than the name says, right? Better than Friendship for Teens, I'm told. So, yes.
So,
what's that second thing that we have this morning?
The second thing that you need to know, there's a little story I have. I was driving here this morning and saw a guy on one of those fat tire bikes with a kid attached to it by a rope in a sled. And the kid had a sled in the sled. So clearly they were like headed somewhere, enjoying time together, and headed to go find a sledding hill, which just reminds me that like what you value is what you put your time and your money and your energy into, right? If you value having a good time with your kids, if you value fitness, you're going to buy yourself a fat tire bike.
Yeah, and
rope.
that's what you're going to do next, right?
Yes.
Invest in that.
I have to buy 4 sleds.
4 sleds on the back. It'll be a good time to watch for your neighbors.
How not to maim each other, kind of like that skiing thing. Yes, because it does sound like a whole lot of fun.
But it's an investment.
It is an investment. And if you value Infused Church and creating a place that imperfect people can come together and explore faith and find community, we'd love to have you be part of the team. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can whip out your phone, scan the QR codes here. Serving is a big one. If you're here for the first time and you haven't jumped in anyway, encourage you to do that. Find a spot that makes sense for you, whether that's first impressions or kids or something else or production. You get to know some folks and get to see what Infuse is all about. So, and just talk to somebody. You don't have to scan the QR code, just talk to a real human being in real time.
Either way.
And you can give financially as well if you want to, because that helps power all the things that we do. And as a reminder for us all, the church is not a building or a place. It's not a school building on a given Sunday morning.
It's the people. I have this great dream that someday I'll do this and everyone will just yell, people, back at me.
We're working towards it, so
remember
be ready
that
next
for other
week.
weeks here, yes. But it's not a building or the place. The church is the people. So we take the next 3 minutes to prioritize the people around you that you're watching with, whether that's in this room or watching with you online this morning. We want you to answer this question with someone around you, preferably someone you don't know, which is, what's your favorite TV show to binge watch? We were sharing some of our answers this morning.
Yes. We had time to practice, so you may not have time to practice, but maternity leave is a great time to binge watch TV shows, and you're up at like paternity leave, whatever, but you're up at all hours of the night. So we did Friends.
Yes, that's a great one, which is no longer on Netflix, sorry to say, but you could still binge watch it somehow. I binge watched ER from season 1, which is like probably bad to tell people, but it was a life investment that I made, so that was a good one. Yeah, share with the people around you. Ready, set, go.
All right. The lesson there is don't live in Seattle and go out during a snowstorm, or ice storm rather. And if you think that was like old footage, it wasn't. That was from last month in Seattle. What happens when you get really any kind of weather, but especially an ice storm, because it's so hilly. And they're not used to that, so they don't have any snow plows or de-icing equipment or things like that. It gets dangerous really, really quickly. And so that spurred a story that I personally, I created the story. And the way I did this was I was on my way to, I was on my way home from a church meeting. And I think it was like a Saturday night. It was after a Saturday night service, and everything was fine. And that's kind of how the weather goes out in Seattle, because we lived out there for a couple years. After the service got over, you go out, and there was like 1 to 2 inches of snow on the ground. It's like, whoa, this is very random, very rare occurrence, but it sometimes happens because you're so close to the ocean that the weather just changes so dramatically. And so the weather in this case changed. And what that did for me was it made me feel fairly uncomfortable because, I'm an Iowa guy, so I'm used to snow. What we're not used to so much in Iowa is snow with hills like that. You know what I'm saying? And so it kind of changes the dynamic. And but I had 4-wheel drive, so I felt pretty good. And I'm going to be honest, there was like a little ego going on because to me it's like, well, I'll show these Seattleites how Midwesterners drive in treacherous weather. Like I'll show you kind of thing. It's a very pastoral approach to things. And so I go out to go home to drive. It's like 2 cities away. And so I get there. And the community is called Duval, is kind of built on the side of a hill because it's really getting close to the mountains that kind of surround Seattle. And it literally just goes up and up and up for like 1 to 2 miles. And of course, we're near the top, okay? And so, because that's where pastors can afford to live, at the last city, at the very top. Okay, anyways, city on a hill, think of it that way. It's very religious. Anyways, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go up this hill. This is going to be interesting, but I got 4-wheel drive, so it's probably fine. There's 1 to 2 inches of snow, kind of like there was this morning. And so I start going, and I do not make it. But I can get back down the hill. So I get back down the hill. I'm like, I'm going to do this again. So go up again, and I get farther this time, y'all. I am making progress. And that's the thing you got to remember. If you're making progress, just keep going. That's what I tell myself. So anyways, so I say to myself, I'm going to get up this time because I want to get home tonight because I got church in the morning, all that kind of stuff. So this time I really gun it, okay? And really, get some real good momentum and to get to the top, right? Because that's what every self-respecting pastor do, acquire high speed and don't stop till you get to the top, okay? And so, and some of you are like, oh my gosh, this is a pastor for me. Some of you are like, I don't know about this guy, but that's totally fine. And so I go, and I make it to the top. Very exciting, I know, we should celebrate. But anyways, so how that connects to this series is because in this series we've been talking about, called Ready or Not, how we engage with change, how we connect with change. Because change is a very interesting thing, and it does a lot of interesting things for us. It can lead us to better places. But in a lot of cases, when things change around us, and we've been talking about this, when things change around us, it tends to lead us to fear. It may not be a lasting fear, but at least like a moment in time, brief season of a moment, a few minutes, a few hours, a few weeks of fear. Because you're entering into something that's unknown. Because that's what change does. It changes your routine, it changes your expectations, and then you get to this place of, I don't know what's going to happen. And anytime you don't know what's going to happen, you tend to be a little biologically wired to be a little concerned, a little anxious, a little worried, or just simply afraid. And when you're afraid, you tend to do things that aren't always the most rational. Okay? Is that fair to say? You don't always do the things that are very rational. Specifically, and Stephanie addressed this last week, you tend to throw, and we talked about this in week 1, we have a tendency to throw spears. And that's the biblical story we were looking at in Saul and throwing spears. We tend to try to hurt the people around us, try to regain control of the situation, try to alleviate our fear by throwing spears at people around us. Oftentimes it's with criticism or, critiques or trying to get people's attention. I don't know if you have done this the last couple weeks, but Stephanie and I will say to each other now, like, hey, that was kind of a moment of throwing spears there, sweetheart. I don't say it that nicely, but, you're throwing spears because, and so then my follow-up question is, what are you afraid of? Which is not, I don't know, yeah, some of you are laughing. Some of you husbands are laughing. So it's not necessarily, it's a good question, but maybe not always right in that moment. But there is something that you're afraid of. You're not afraid of not being loved. You're afraid of not being validated. You're afraid of what's going to come. And so in response, we throw spears. We talked to a pretty great extent about that, okay? And so what I want to do for today is I want to talk about, we covered the throwing spears part. I want to talk about something else that we do that fear and change tends to lead us to do, and that's this right here. When we're afraid, we tend to change right and wrong. We don't abide by the rules we normally would if we weren't afraid, or if change wasn't on our doorstep. Let me give you a couple examples. For example, when bad weather happens in Seattle, and you really want to get home, so you have an expectation of getting home, but things change, you have this tendency, or at least I have this tendency, of then changing the rules, changing what's right and wrong. So for me, getting up that hill, do you think I paid attention to if there were any stop signs? Absolutely not. Why? Because you can't slow down if you want to make it home. And so, in my mind, I don't even think I processed this, but I just didn't pay attention to, because the goal of getting home and the situation at hand meant that stop signs just really didn't exist, okay? Do you think I cared about my speed or the speed limit in that situation? No. Why? Because at that point, right and wrong really didn't matter, because I just needed to make it home. Where was I going to stay for that? I mean, it's just, the series of questions in my head of how the evening was going to go if I couldn't get home, and so I just justified my decisions because I was a little concerned about the situation at hand. I don't know if you've ever done this, but sometimes during bad weather, some of us, if we're driving in bad rain or bad snow or something, we'll tend to drive more like in the center of the road to give ourselves some margin on each side. Is that legal? No. Some of you are like, is it legal? No, it's not. But you do. Why? Well, because you're a little afraid. Other examples, like relational examples, is if you have a secret that you're trying to hide, big secret, embarrassing secret, I don't know, you just don't want people to know, you're hiding something, you're afraid somebody's going to find out, right? Isn't that the biggest issue with a secret or hiding something, is you are afraid people may find out. And so to prevent that secret from being found out, what do? You change right and wrong, right? You will be willing to lie to protect that secret, to protect that thing, to protect that embarrassment, when otherwise you wouldn't say that that is something that defines you. You wouldn't consider yourself a liar, but to protect that, you will. You will, in some cases, even undermine relationships just to avoid that truth coming out. In fact, some people will even go to great lengths to do wrong by other people to protect that coming out. Why? Because you're afraid. Or if you have a relationship in your past that has meant something to you, and someone betrayed you or hurt you or undermined your trust or was very inconsiderate or something like that, it, one, makes you angry, right? You're upset that they hurt you and they said those things or they did those things or whatever it may be. You're angry. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, but I bet you in the midst of that anger, there was also a bit of fear. There was a bit of anxiety. There was a bit of worry, because you were afraid of what they may be telling other people about you. You were afraid of how they may treat you in the future. You may be afraid of running into them out in the world and how they were going to treat you. Maybe they were going to cause you harm, or the situation at hand that they created, or in your mind they created, was going to continue to cause you harm. And so, therefore, you really considered and maybe even made some decisions that were maybe more on the wrong side than what you normally would have. Like you told yourself it was okay to judge them now, when normally you wouldn't consider yourself a very judgmental person. Or you may talk bad about them to other people, so that other people, like you knew that you'd have people in your camp if things went south. You had your people that were on your side of the equation, then there was the people on the other side. And so you wanted to kind of hurt them back if you could. And so, maybe you did some things to kind of poke or throw spears at them so that you could regain control of the situation. And because you feel like the situation at hand was unfair, that you were getting the short end of the stick, that you deserve better or whatnot. And so what did you do? You compromised your traditional values, your traditional version of right and wrong, because you're afraid. And so that's what I want to talk about today, because in the midst of that, we have some big decisions and big consequences often at hand, probably consequences that we don't even realize. And so to do that, we're going to go back to the story that we've been in the last 2 weeks. And if you haven't been there, that's totally okay. You can go back and watch the last 2 weeks about David and Saul. It was King Saul at the time and David, who would eventually become king of Israel. They lived about 3,000 years ago. David would become a great Israelite king, well known. They make statues and paintings and all this about him. And David, so far in this story, we've been in 1 Samuel, he's been rocking it. I mean, he is a guy that you should admire so far in this story. Like in the midst of change and challenge, David stepped up. Like David was the rock. He met those challenges and that change with faith. He met those with leadership. He met them by taking the high road and sticking to his moral compass, sticking to God's moral compass. And so, again, you can always watch those the past 2 weeks online. But so to pick up the story, 1 Samuel, at this point in the story that we've been going on so far, David is on the run. That's really all you need to know. He's on the run because King Saul is done with David and he wants to take him out. Because David's popularity, Saul felt threatened by it. Saul is under the idea now that David's after him, even though David has done nothing, truly nothing wrong, other than serving King Saul. But this, David is now on the run, is where David slips up, as so many of us do. And this is why this story is so incredibly relatable and why we need to pay attention. Because this is the point at which we see David falling to fear. David in this moment falls to fear. He gives in to fear. Change is at hand. He could be afraid. So far he has it. He's met it well. But this is it. He does not meet the situation with love. He does not go the high road, as Stephanie was talking about last week, meeting situations with love. And he changes what's right and wrong. And that was what was really admirable about David up to this point in the story, is he stuck with it. And now he's going to give up. And you've seen this story. You've seen this story in TV shows. You've seen this story in real life. And you've maybe even seen this story in your own life, though it's difficult to look at when we give up on what is right and wrong. So David escapes Jerusalem. He's on the run. He's all alone, which is a very new experience for David. For the past few years, or months at least, he's been a kind of a big deal. A lot of attention goes to him. He's on his way to a nearby town called Nob. And I would put up a map of where that is, but we don't know where that is. Archaeologically, we have some ideas of where the little town of Nob would have been, but there's no evidence to say this is for sure where it is. Some towns we know, sometimes we don't. Y'all, we're still learning so much about the traditions of the past and the history of the past through archaeological discovery, and we'll learn more and more every year. It's really cool, especially if you get to go to Jerusalem and experience that. So anyways, somewhere he's outside of Jerusalem, maybe a day or two walk, okay? And he goes to Nob because that's where the tabernacle is, the tabernacle tent. And this goes all the way back to the early pages of the Old Testament with Moses and the law and the place of meeting. And this is where the presence of God resided. This was the holy of holy places, okay? Eventually they would make it into a temple and it would sit in Jerusalem, but right now it's portable still. And so it would move around, and right now it's in Nob. And so he's going there. And you think to yourself, I think to myself, great, he's heading to connect with God. He's heading to a safe space to kind of level set before he figures out what he's going to do next. He's going to go be in the presence of the Lord. He's going to seek out faith. Wow, what an awesome thing to do. Go, David. But that's absolutely not what he's going to do. Because he goes there, and he's going to have this exchange with the high priest, whose name is Elimelech, the head of the church, if you will, but the head of the faith, the Jewish faith at the time, the Israelite faith, and the kind of the conduit between God and the people, the high priest, okay? And so he shows up, And yeah, I don't know, he walks in maybe to the tent area or something, and there's the high priest, Elimelech, and he looks up, and there's David walking towards him. And here's what 1 Samuel says. Elimelech trembled when he met David. And we don't know for sure why he trembled, but I suppose we could insinuate that the whole situation took him by surprise, because you look up and you're like, is that famous person? Like if you looked up and you saw like a famous actor or actress or somebody that everybody knows or politician or something, you're like, whoa, what's this guy doing here? But it's not just any guy, it's David. It's the guy whom people are singing about in song and verse that's greater than Saul, and he slays so many people. He's one of Saul's, his right-hand man, his best warrior. He slayed Goliath, this is a guy who's not only faithful, but he is a proficient warrior, and I think the whole situation just took him by surprise, and so he trembled. And he asked him a very honest question, David, why are you alone? Why is no one with you? And this is that moment where we have a decision to make. And unfortunately, we usually make this decision prior to this moment. Like we know what we're going to do when we go into these moments. But this is the right and wrong decision for David. And he's not going to choose right. Because the honest answer would have been, hey, Elimelech, good to see you again. David here. Saul's lost his mind. He's going after me. He's trying to kill me. I'm running away. But that's not what David does. Because fear creeps in to David's heart and David's mind. And he tells himself something that we tell ourselves. We give ourselves excuses and justification and everything else in between, don't we? And what does David probably tell himself? He says, well, if I tell Elimelech the truth, then he's probably not going to believe me because I'm all alone and the situation at hand. He's probably going to go tell Saul, who's then going to know where I'm at and the direction I'm heading, and he's going to come after me, or maybe Elimelech will call for guards or anything like that, and it's just going to ruin everything. And so I can't be honest with this guy. There's just no way I can be honest, that I could do in this situation the right thing. And so this is where the disaster starts, and he lies. Right and wrong don't matter here because of fear. And so what does he say? He answered Elimelech, the priest, the king sent me on a mission and said to me, no one is to know anything about the mission I am sending you on. How convenient. How convenient. As he lies through his teeth, because that's what fear does. It takes this healthy situation and corrupts it. And corrupts it. And this is, I think, for Christians, if you're a Christian in the room, if you're not a Christian, you're just figuring out, you get to look at Christians and say, hey Christians, this is what you should be doing, okay? If you consider yourself a Jesus follower, here's how you should approach this situation and recognize what David is about to learn, that fear corrupts your confidence in God. David is standing before the high priest of the Lord, a descendant of Aaron, the brother of Moses. And his response is to what? Lie. Like on earth, he is in proximity of the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy of Holies, and his choice before God's presence and before God's ambassador, if you will, is to lie. And when you let fear destroy your confidence in God, it's going to block your ability to feel God's presence, to hear anything from God, and the strength that he could give you. And in so doing, lose what's right and what's wrong. Because that's what fear does. It inhibits love, as Stephanie said last week. Love prioritizes people. Love prioritizes your neighbor. Love prioritizes truth and grace and your family and your friends. Fear prioritizes you above all else. And whenever it takes hold, you will compromise right and wrong because it is whatever, right and wrong doesn't matter, it's whatever is in the best service of number one, you. There's no room for curiosity in fear. There's no room for relationships. There's no room for God's Spirit. And so that's why David lies to Elimelech. To protect himself, he betrays another's trust, as if it didn't even matter. But it does matter. Because so often in our lives, what we don't realize is what we are afraid is going to happen, what we're hiding behind, and fear is driving us to believe, is eventually going to happen in one way or the other anyways. Because as the story goes on, now it says, one of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief shepherd. So what's going to happen anyways? Saul's going to find out regardless. Because Doeg's sitting over there in the corner like, oh, is that David? What is happening here? And so he's watching this whole thing transpire. Watching David betray what is right and what is wrong. And what was inevitable that Saul was going to find out is going to happen anyways. But it doesn't get worse. Doeg's watching, David's lying to Elimelech's face before the Lord, and David says this, don't you have a spear? David asks the high priest for a spear. He is going to fight fire, Saul, throwing spears at him with fire, which, I mean, outside of actually fighting real fire, does not go well. And then it gets so much worse, and it's not even the end of getting worse. He goes on. Does he have a spear or a sword here? I just haven't brought mine because, the king's mission was so urgent. Okay, wait, so David, you're telling me that Saul, the guy who always has a spear in his hand, like 5 times throughout the Old Testament, talks about how Saul had a spear near his head or on him or holding a spear and all this stuff. So you're telling me it was so urgent, Saul didn't even have time to hand you a spear, but for some reason you're able to stop before the high priest and say, hey, God's representative, do you got a spear on you? Could I borrow one, or a sword perhaps? He doubles down on the lie because that's what we do when we're afraid. We double down because then we're afraid now people are going to find out the lie upon the lie upon the lie upon the lie. And they're going to find out we're afraid. And how many people in your life do you want to know that you're afraid? We don't want to admit that. We don't want to be honest about that. And so instead of trying to make it better, what do? We make it worse. Haven't brought my sword. David is now becoming a Saul. He's doing the same thing that Saul did, trying to regain a control, regain security in his fear. And so Elimelech the priest replied. He said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, take it. There is no sword but that one here. Oh my gosh. So the sword of Goliath, whom David slew for Saul, which made David extremely popular among the entire nation of Israel, just happens to be there. And so do you think David's going to say, oh man, this has gone too far? No, I don't want to take up the sword because the message that's going to send to Saul is going to be bad. He's going to lose his mind. If he finds out I have the sword of Goliath, whom rose me to popularity, all that Saul's going to be able to think about is he's got the sword, he's coming after me to take over with that sword. That's all he's going to think, right? And so what does David do? He says, there is none like it. Give me that sword, buddy. Look at you coming through. I'm ready, I mean, it's like this is devolved into a terrible situation. Because Saul, as soon as he finds out from Doeg what's happened, that David has taken up the sword of Goliath, he is going to absolutely lose it. Like to a fear to a point of no return. And that's exactly what happened. And Saul shows up in Nob at the tabernacle and not only kills Elimelech, but his entire family. Because he is so consumed with fear. But also because David was so consumed with fear. And David justified his lies because of the fear. Because think about this. What if David would have stopped in this moment and just sat down and listened to a nudge from the Lord? Because I think the message that God would have gotten through, tried to get through to David, if David would have just stopped for a second and recognize the fear overflowing inside of him, would have been something along the lines of, David, you didn't need a sword to kill Goliath. A sword did not bring you this great fame and notoriety. So why do you need one now? David, when have I failed you so far? And when has following my commands and glorifying my name failed you so far, David, that you need to take up a sword? Why do you need one now, David? Well, because you're afraid. But David, I think the Lord would try to say to David, you're my child. Let me be your stronghold. And I think this because of the Psalms that are attributed to David and the songs that David wrote and the poems that David wrote, and he talked about God in this way. And I like to think it's because he learned some valuable lessons through these experiences, and he wanted to pass them along. He called God his stronghold because there is no freedom in fear. There is no peace in fear. And I think that's a message, regardless of where you are in faith, that you would benefit from today, is that in fear and anxiety and worry and compromising right and wrong, there is no peace. There is no freedom. What if David would have resisted fear and said, when Elimelech said, why are you here? What's going on? And he said something to the effect of, hey, here's the deal, Elimelech. Everybody's singing about me. Saul's afraid of me. But I wouldn't hurt the Lord's anointed king, which is something David will say eventually in a future interaction with Saul. Elimelech, I wouldn't hurt the Lord's anointed. He started throwing spears at me because he feels threatened. He's afraid. And so I left, and I'm running. Got any food? I'm hungry. Can you help me out? Then Elimelech would have the choice of how to respond to that truth. And he could have very well said, hey, David, I hear where you're coming from, but I serve the king, and I really can't help you in this moment. And so I would, encourage you to keep moving. Could have said that. Who knows? And then Doeg would have gone back to Saul and said, hey, he went to Elimelech. Elimelech did not give him the sword of Goliath. He could have, but didn't. He said, hey, I serve the king, and so you got to keep moving, David. That could have happened. We don't know. We'll never know. That's what lies do, though, is they corrupt. That's what fear does, though. So often it corrupts. And we'll never get to know if the outcome could have been different. And so the truth that I want you to leave here with today, that I think you would all be, again, regardless of your faith, where you are in your faith, would be better served if, that in the middle of that change that you may be going through right now, you may have gone through in the past, and you certainly will go through in the future, in the middle of that fear, as it creeps into your heart, often overshadowed sometime by our anger, so recognize, hey, there's a piece of my anger that is driven by fear, and you call it for what it is, that you remember this thing. And this thing, good news, it was going to be a really lame thing. And then it got really a lot better, because I had this version of this statement, this little one-liner for you to remember, and it was pretty lame. And then I talked to Aaron, who's been coming here for a couple of months so far, new Infuse and Tender, and he was sharing some of the things he kind of lives by. And so his version of this was way better than mine, and it rhymes. And so I was like, can I share this little gem with everybody this week? And he said yes, because this is something he tells his students in class. I think they even have a song. He has shirts for this, people. You can maybe hit him up to buy a shirt from him. This is the phrase, okay? Shine a light and do it right, or do what's right. Shine a light and do what's right. And I love this because it is so Jesus. The disciples went to Jesus and said, hey, Jesus, if my friend wrongs me, if they hurt me, if they betray me and all this stuff, how many times do I got to forgive them? Do I have to forgive them more than once? If I forgive them once, can we just call it good, and then I can be angry at them and be afraid of them and, back and forth and build anger and fear and anger and fear? And so Jesus says, no. He's like, okay, well, what if I forgive them 7 times? Is that enough? And Jesus says, no, you need to forgive them 77 times. In other words, it's never enough. You need to keep forgiving them. You need to keep loving them. Why? Because otherwise then fear takes hold, and anger takes hold, And there's no room for love. And confidence in your Heavenly Father will be eroded. So keep hitting those people, not with your fist, but with forgiveness. Do not be afraid to do that. Do not be afraid. Well, Jesus, what if somebody actually hits me? What do I do? Do I hit him back? Because that's what fear would do, right? That's the fear response. Fight or run away. Jesus said what? Turn the other cheek. Fear says, stay mad, get angry, you'll be justified. But what did Jesus say? Go to your brother and reconcile with them. Forgive them, reconcile. Before you even reach out to God, make it right with your brother or sister. Come to peace, reconcile with one another. Do not give in to fear. Jesus and God said over and over and over again throughout the whole Bible, over and over. I can't tell you how many times this was said. Do not fear. Don't do it. Why? Why? Because it is really difficult. It's really easy to fear. It is very difficult to do what's right. It's very difficult in a situation to shine a light, to follow Christ. When we fear the truth or the truth coming out, we have a tendency to lash out. When we have a fear that we're not going to be accepted, when we have a fear that we're going to be overwhelmed by peer pressure or the consequences sometimes of our actions, we go to fear as a defensive mechanism. And then we compromise what's right and wrong, and we really should go to truth. Because you never know the full consequences of your actions. Like, you're afraid it's going to get worse, but I can guarantee you, you will make it worse by compromising or continuing to compromise what is right and what is wrong. Especially that version of right and wrong that you live by most of your life. But in those scary situations, we tend to bend those rules to alleviate short-term issues, but in so doing generally create long-term issues. The truth is that we should tell the truth. You know, sometimes fear is an okay thing. It helps us pay attention to something when it's not going well. It may say, hey, you need to walk away from that relationship like David did because they're controlling you with fear. And if somebody is controlling you with fear, that's not loving. It's going to be very difficult for God to make his way into that situation. It's very difficult. But when you do, when you walk away from fear, that's where freedom and peace can be found. I mean, think about how you parent or how you were parented. Would your parents ever be okay? Or how often would your parents be okay if you said, well, I know you said this was what's right and this was what's wrong, but, you know, given the circumstances and all this thing, I think I think I was justified in picking the more wrong option, you know? Generally, a parent is not going to say, hey, that's okay that you hit him back in the face. That'll fix it. That's healthy. Continue to do that through adulthood, because if you do it as a child and you get it right then, if you keep hitting people through adulthood, it's really going to work out for you. No, you say you can't do that, because in adulthood, it will not work out for you. There will always be someone bigger. You know what I mean? But yet we do that more often than not with our words, even as adults. Why? Because we're afraid. If the roads aren't safe and you can't drive legally, then maybe, just maybe, I'm talking to myself here, you shouldn't drive at all. Right? If you have to lie about it, it probably isn't right, and it definitely won't shine a light. As our church changes over the next year or so, as we go from kind of 2 locations, online and in person, to a location in Cedar Rapids as well, things will change. And our response to change generally will be, oh no, this affects me and I'm not sure I like it. Therefore, I will be afraid and angry. And I won't shine a light. Instead, what if you meant it with curiosity? What if you met it, the change and the challenge, by prioritizing people and loving people and seeking the Spirit, as David did in his best moments and as David did not do in his worst moments. That's what the great thing of Jesus, following Jesus, has taught me, is life is better doing right. It's just better. Not always comfortable, not always fun, but it is better. It is better. This is why when we talk about groups, we do this a couple times a year, and we talk about joining a group. Why? Because fear is difficult. Navigating fear is difficult when you're alone, like David was. But if David would have had people with him, as David eventually would, it could make it better. And that's the great thing of the church. The church can help with that. The church can come alongside you. Again, regardless of your faith. When we say imperfect people exploring faith, we really mean that. You can join a group and not have faith figured out. In fact, a majority of people at Infuse do not have it figured out. A majority of people at Infuse have not been to church in a long time, and they're coming back for the first time. And that's okay. But let's learn and let's grow. Imagine, just real quick, imagine if tomorrow or this week, everyone did this. They said, yes, I was wrong. Yes, I was afraid of the consequences. Yes, I'm going to be honest now. And I'm going to ask for reconciliation. I'm going to ask for forgiveness. And we're going to figure this out. Let's be honest. Our world doesn't even know how to process something like that. All we know how to do is like shame and push people down and push them away and, exile them in a way. We don't know how to reconcile. You know why? Because we're all so just afraid. And it is so hard to reconcile when people are afraid. So just imagine in our world. It's even difficult to do. What would all the politicians do? I don't know. Hey, I was wrong. What? If you had all of the politicians, in just one branch of government, just be like, hey, been messing up for a while. It's like, whoa, who are you? I don't even know if I can trust you, Could this be part of the problem in our world? As fear hits us and we change the rules. And this is why I think Jesus is still so incredibly relevant to today, because in the midst of the world's rules, he came in and he was a light, consistently right, driving us to a higher standard that he knew we could reach with his help and forgiveness. So my encouragement to you is to really consider how it looks like to shine a light and to do it right, to let your heart really be changed by that love and to share that with other people. To put your value in Christ and to realize your value in Christ. And the confidence that, yes, doing the right thing may be difficult and uncomfortable, but it is still the right thing to do. And sometimes that brings a great deal of freedom because it's just more straightforward. It's just straightforward, though difficult to do. But that's where peace is, and that's where freedom is. If you would, bow your heads, let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you. Thank you that we can learn from David's mistakes, that we just don't have to make them ourselves. Thank you that we get to look at this 3,000-year-old story and in some ways realize that we haven't changed too much, that we're still wrestling with some of the same problems that humanity was wrestling with millennia ago. But that we can also find peace and freedom that your truth of not fearing, but meeting it with faith, meeting it with forgiveness, meeting that fear with curiosity and with hope, meeting that fear in a very unusual way, like turning the other cheek, of doing what's right, even when what's right is difficult. Those truths and so many others are still things we can do and still things we can find peace in. We can still find freedom in. We can still find transformation and redemption in. That fear doesn't have to control us. It can guide us. It can help us to pay attention to what's going on around us, but it doesn't have to control us. And that your values, your love can guide us even in the midst of change and challenge. Lord, help us to connect with you, that kind of God, that kind of value setter, that kind of light in the darkness that you are, that you showed through your son, Jesus, that you encourage and strengthen us with through your Spirit. Help us to look at that. Help us to be drawn to that every day, to realize by taking steps towards you, not leaps sometimes, but simply just steps, one after the other towards you, we can experience that peace and hope and grace instead of that fear and worry and anxiety that so consume our world. That we can do right because it's right. And because doing right shines a light and encourages others to do the same. Lord, help each of us, no matter where we are, no matter our relationship with you or lack of relationship with you, feel in our hearts and our presence and our spirit that this is good, that this is right, because it's from you. It's thousands of years old from you to help us navigate and go through and experience life as it was meant to be today. Lord, help us in this. In your name I pray. Amen. Hey, thanks for sticking around. We're going to stand up. We're going to sing one last song, and it's about how we fight our battles, how we fight the spears when they're coming at us. So please stand and join us in this last song.
There's a table that you prepared for me in the presence of my enemies. It's your body and your blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. There's a table you prepare for me in the presence of my enemies. It's your body and your blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. And I believe you've overcome. This is how I fight my battles. 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 This is how in the valley I know that you're with me, and surely your goodness and your mercy follow me. So my weapons are praise and thanksgiving. This is how I fight my battles. And I believe you've overcome, and I will lift my song of praise for what you've done. This is how I fight my battles. 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 This is It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Thanks for joining us so much here at Infuse in person and online. If it's your first Sunday, please check out the Next Step table. Have a great week.
Hey everybody, good to see you back. There were a bunch of people in the chat. There was a Carly, there were 2 Rhondas, there was a Kit, I think there was a Carly L, so maybe 2
Multiple
Carlys. Multiple Carlys.
And we were also reading how someone has someone in their neighborhood that does it for us, plows the snow for them.
A 4-wheeler with a blade. I think that was Heather.
jealous.
So yes. So we're happy for you.
We are happy for you, but jealous for you too. But what a great message from Pastor Taylor today. I really liked how applicable it was. I say that every week, but this week too, I think like we've all had times in our life where we've been faced with fear and just made the wrong choice. And so that shine a light and do what's right, I think we can remember that and stick with it this week. So yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I hope you all walk away with that for next week. I am actually going to be talking next week about one more story from David's life. We fast forward further into his life when he's king and he's about to lose it all and how he responds to that change.
Flip the switch there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, that'll be good. Well, I can't wait to hear from you, Devin, next week.
We'll see.
And we'll be here joining you again, same time, same place.